Hey everyone, and welcome to another Tourpreneur podcast. Now, we've all seen how tourism can be a force for good, but today's guests are truly walking the talk. Now, first up, we have Jonathan Coleman from the Untours Foundation, an organisation that this doesn't just fund businesses, but actively invest in travel ventures that are changing the world for the better. And one of those people changing the world for the better is Zakia Malawi-Gwiri from Invisible Cities, which is a social enterprise and a tour operator that trains people who have been affected by homelessness to become tour guides, sharing their hidden stories of the cities that they call home. Guys, welcome to the Tourpreneur podcast.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, great to
Thank
be
you
here.
for having us.
Excellent. Jonathan, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with yourself. So there might be a few people out there who are a little bit unfamiliar about the Untours Foundation and who you are. So just explain a little bit about it to the listeners, and how did it come to life?
Yeah, the Untours Foundation is our current reality is at the middle of a 50-year journey that started 50 years ago with a travel company called Untours, which was started by a really interesting and forward-thinking founder who viewed the world and viewed business differently than a lot of his peers. And so he started Untours, which was this kind of slower travel, sustainable travel, more culturally immersive travel, which is, of course, like the things that are very common these days. But in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't, especially for Americans, which is where the company was based. And so Untours was set up mostly helping Americans travel to Europe in a slower, more culturally immersive way, in a way that supported local communities and economies more intentionally. So that company started to achieve some level of success as a small business. So it got into the 80s and into the 90s. But along that journey, Hal, our founder, had also been on a personal journey and eventually decided to take a vow of poverty, committing to having no money, essentially, enough to live, to eat, but nothing more. And so and he was completely committed to that and fully legitimate in that. He, gave his car away to a hitchhiker one day, and he never drove again. Rode his bike for the rest of his life, or used public transport. Just as an example. So, Untours, the travel company, started to make some money, and Hal the founder realized he needed to do something with this money that could be good. So, the first few years of profits at Untours, he actually wrote checks back to the clients and said, "I'm sorry, I charged you too much. Here's some money back." Because he wasn't in it to make money.
I can already hear the jaws dropping from a lot of operators listening to this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, finally you've achieved this goal, and then the response is to give people their money back. Yeah. But this shows that he was like viewing his life and his role in business and the role of business in society. He was viewing it all differently than most. But he eventually decided to set up the foundation to take all of the profits of Untours. And that happened in the early 90s. So that was kind of the genesis of how the foundation began. Just kind of to fast forward quickly on the Untours, the company, just because there's some interesting pieces of the story there. Because Untours was in like this early cohort of social businesses in the US and thinking about business differently, Hal and the company caught the eye of the folks who founded the B Corp movement as they were framing out what B Corps would be and that whole certification process. So they looked at Untours as one of the inspirations for the framework and the certification that they set up. And Untours is actually the first ever company to go through that certification and get certified. So we are the world's first ever certified B Corp, not in travel, but ever total, which is of course something that we're proud of. I had nothing to do with it personally, so I will claim it proudly. But it's obviously something it's an interesting part of our journey. And now Hal, the founder, passed away in his 90s. He was quite old by then, a number of years ago. And when he did, he transferred ownership of the travel company to the foundation. So just to put a bow on that story, we now have a nonprofit foundation that is the 100% owner of a for-profit B Corp travel company. And that when that company has profits, those pass on up to the foundation, which was always happening anyway. But the legal relationship was separate until the founder passed away, and then now that legal kind of relationship is together. On the foundation side, we're also set up in a really unique way because we weren't set up as a grant-making institution. Set up back in the early 90s, essentially as an impact investor. So using the assets of the foundation and turning that into a revolving impact fund. So that's how the foundation has achieved its impact for the last 30 years. Now, those who are listening maybe would have heard the term impact investing, but that wasn't even a term that existed in those days. So now we use that term, but it was just kind of Hal thinking, I think there's a better way to use this money than just to grant it out to never see it again. Maybe we can lend it in really accessible ways to social entrepreneurs, to impact-focused entrepreneurs, allow them to do more of their good work, but get the money back and then do it again. And so that was his idea from the beginning. There's also this, like, in most family foundations, especially, there's this crazy disconnect between the assets and the impact. And so most of the money that sits in endowments of foundations sits in stocks and bonds and traditional investments. At best in a neutral way compared to the mission, not really helping the mission at all, but oftentimes directly in contrast to the mission. So you have an environmental focused foundation that invests in fossil fuels, for example. And so they're making the money on the exact thing that's causing the problems they're trying to solve with their grant making. So there's this whole kind of paradigm that Hal the founder didn't want to, thought was crazy. And so he set his foundation up differently. So we are, have been doing that for 30 years, but not in tourism. And so again, to reach the end of this long story, about 2.5 years ago, we made the decision to actually redirect some of our focus directly in the industry. So we started the Reset Tourism Fund, which exists specifically to invest in social enterprises and impact-focused tourism businesses like Invisible Cities. We put some of our money in, but the whole idea was that our money is not enough. There's a huge need. Small businesses in the tourism space do not have the capital they need to grow, especially those with an impact focus. There's a massive gap. And so we want to fill that gap, but we don't have enough money to fill it. So we set it up as a kind of platform so that other larger, more resourced travel companies or travel-related philanthropies can get involved. And then we can kind of manage the actual lending or investing process because we know how to do that. And so we've now worked with partners from across the industry, from Expedia and Skyscanner and TUI and Agoda now and a few others. Exo Travel, Masher. So there's a number of partners that have come in and joined us and more on the way to give us more resources that then we can turn that into these revolving impact investments. Mm-hmm. With that, I will stop my monologue and pass it back over to you.
No, I find it fascinating, and like I say, I can imagine some tour operators listening, going, "Why are they giving their money away?" That just won't compute for some people. No, your sort of tagline is sort of investing in world-changing businesses, but what does that actually look like within the tourism space? No, what classes are another business that you want to fund as being world-changing? No, talk me through that.
Yeah, there can be a lot of. That's a wide kind of description in which a lot of tourism businesses could fall within. But the idea is, well, number one, we think that tourism as a whole is world-changing. Not always for the better, but it is world-changing. And so, tourism represents 10% of global GDP and 10% of global jobs and almost 10% of global emissions. So that's like a massive impact on how the world goes, and then 80% of businesses in the industry are small businesses. So we can't, while a lot of attention gets paid to the major kind of tourism brands out there, there are, if we're ignoring the small businesses in the space, we're not harnessing truly the power of business to achieve positive impact as opposed to kind of negative impact, or at least mitigating the negative impact. So that's the lane we play in. Is supporting those small and medium-sized tourism businesses. And what world-changing can mean can look a lot of different ways. So Zakia will tell us about Invisible Cities, but it's specifically kind of an intervention around a local social problem that tourism can help solve. But we also have a lot of investments in kind of the accessible or inclusive tourism world, where we're helping folks who have been historically neglected or underserved by the industry be able to travel and be able to travel better. There's actually a huge market for that. And so there's just need businesses to be able to serve that. But it's also it's kind of a black mark in the industry that we haven't better made the power of tourism accessible to people who maybe have some challenges to be able to do so otherwise. So that can be a world-changing tourism business. It could be one that's locally set up in a coastal community that's using tourism to both provide high quality jobs for local residents and also conserve a local ecosystem or conserve a local kind of marine ecosystem. So we see a lot of that happening, and the small businesses are at the front lines of this, of ensuring that the people that visit their community are leaving it better than they found it. And so again, that's why we want to empower them. So I could go on with many other examples, but that's just a few kind of the ideas of the types of companies that we are identifying, and then trying to give the capital they need to make improvements to be better for the world, based on their mission, and just to expand, to do more, to be a bigger, better company from a financial perspective as well, because we need the best companies in the world to also be bigger and scaled up and handle more clients, bring more positive stuff into the world.
Oh, but before I move on to Zakia, and not to put you on the spot that Zakia's here, so what stood out for you in terms of invisible cities to make that a clear yes for you guys to sort of say, okay, these guys are a prime example of us sort of helping them out?
Yeah, we are a foundation, so we are very much kind of mission driven in the types of investments that we make. Same as if we were making grants, donations, to an NGO or a nonprofit. But we're not making grants; we're making loans to businesses by and large, or to NGOs that have a business activity built in. So that's like the narrow focus that we have. And so we have to look at both sides. We have to look at the impact. We have to, in the kind of world changing aspect of the business, it needs to be real, and it needs to be, in the best case scenarios, embedded into the DNA of the business, so that as the business grows, the impact grows alongside it. But also we have to look at the business, and looking at the business as a traditional investor or a traditional lender would look. So we do due diligence, and Zakia knows about this because she just went through it, where we're digging deep into the finances, we're understanding the business model, we're looking at kind of the same stuff that any traditional investor looks at, but we just connect that with the impact due diligence as well. And so both of those have to connect for us. And then the last piece, which again is not like groundbreaking in the world of investing, is it's about the entrepreneur. And do they have it? Do they have like that something that entrepreneurs need to have to achieve success? And so about Invisible Cities, we'll learn more about the details. But the first time Zakia and I met, it's quite clear to me within half an hour that they have an impactful business model. They have a business model that makes financial sense, and they have a really strong entrepreneur leader to drive it forward. And those are the three key components. And so it was, from that point, it was like, not, are we going to do this with Invisible Cities? It's like, when and how. When is the best time and the right structure? Right. When do they need it? And when do we have the right source of capital to make it happen? But from then on, I was convinced we would find a way to support, because we believed in those three components of what is Invisible Cities.
So Zakia, we'll move on to yourself. So for those, you've been on the podcast a few times now, but for those who are maybe unfamiliar about who Invisible Cities are and the concept that you have, just keep in mind explaining a little bit about what you guys do.
Yes. So we're based in the UK now, between Scotland, England and Wales, and work with people who have an experience of homelessness, and that can be a wide range of different social challenges, to train them to become tour guides and operate as a tour operator. So we do walking tours of 6 locations, but all our tour guides have a lived experience of homelessness, addiction, mental health, have gone to prison, have experienced domestic violence. No 2 guides have the same story, and we train them and employ them so that our tours are uniquely designed by them, break down the stereotypes that can exist around homelessness in our part of the world and everywhere in the world, I believe, but also that they can then move on and use Invisible Cities as a stepping stone towards other positive things. So we're not 50 years old yet. We're like 9 years down our journey, which is still crazy to me because it goes fast. But so to date, we've trained now nearly 170 people between our locations, and currently have 22 guides now that are regularly employed, and that can be from very part-time, very light to part-time, full-time in the high season. So it really depends.
No, and obviously, I just saw you recently. You were walking around with royalty recently. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, well, and Jonathan was there as well, so that was an amazing, amazing moment. So, I mean, so we just launched in Aberdeen in the north of Scotland, in partnership with the Royal Foundation. So the Royal Foundation is the kind of charitable organization led by Prince William and his wife, and kind of focuses on different strands and different themes. One of them is homelessness through a program called Homewards. So a little bit of a surreal moment. At the end of the last year, we did a piece to promote the tours in Scotland that was featured on the BBC. And I think, Chris, you kindly sent me a lot of pictures of it as you put it live on TV.
I was sitting in the morning having my coffee and I just went,
so, it's yeah. So that piece actually is something that they saw at the foundation, and then got in touch with us and said, how can we work together? You are across the UK, we are across the UK. How can that work out? And we identified that Aberdeen as a city could be the place where we could collaborate. And they kind of are there to support and make connections in the world of homelessness, eradicating it, bringing a light onto it. So we started our first round of training in February, the end of January, February of this year, with a big event to launch the tours in March. And then the agenda and the magic of working behind the scenes meant that we could have a special guest on the first ever tour that we did in Aberdeen with Prince William. So he came on a private tour for about half an hour with our guide Angus and myself, and then ended up the tour in a space where he met a lot of partners and sponsors and supporters in the sector, including Jonathan, who kindly came all the way from the US to Aberdeen. But what I really wanted was to showcase that travel is that force for good. We work in the homelessness sector, and so locally we are embedded in that, but I wanted him to see, and I wanted everybody in the room to understand that we're part of that movement that can do positive things through travel, whatever that is, right? So we designed the day so that could be the focus. And so he met with different partners. And then we also kind of announced that we will launch in all the locations now where Homewards and the foundation actually works. So that's 5 other locations in the UK by the end of 2026, which will take us to 10 cities in 10 years. Next year. And so we're at that stage of growing and kind of growing our impact as well, which is also how Untours kind of comes into to help us scale and really replicate what we do quite quickly and in a better
fantastic
way.
And tell us a little bit about how you guys have benefited from Jonathan's support. Now, how did you first get connected together? Now, how did that come about?
We met when you came to Edinburgh, Jonathan, for a trip to visit some of the locations that are used, or some of the things that Untours as a business, as a tour company kind of uses.
That's right.
Is that right?
And it was early on into the Reset Tourism Fund when we were just looking to have some kind of example investments with our own money, just put it out in the world so then we could start to kind of bring more partners in. And so I was also just, researching and trying to find those best example tourism companies to support. So either someone referred or I don't know how exactly I heard of Invisible Cities, but then I reached out to Zakia and said, hey, here's what we're doing. We should talk. And then we did. And then it took some time to culminate the relationship. But that, from the beginning, it seemed like there was an obvious fit there.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love so much about the world of travel, right? I think I met your colleague, somebody in your team, Daniel, as part of a Travel Massive WhatsApp group, Facebook group, I can't remember. And then met at a conference face-to-face in Berlin at Arrival, to name them. And so then when we got introduced face-to-face, so we had been in touch and kind of connected for at least a couple of years before the opportunity to have investment and to work in a practical way came along. But, you know, there was the Adventure Travel Summit in Japan a few years back, where I was also part of a pitching competition to pitch Invisible Cities on stage to different partners and stakeholders, and Untours kindly kind of had me come along and do that. So it's been an ongoing relationship that has culminated for now into, you know, receiving investment and working together in a more practical financial way. But actually, we've received a lot of support and encouragement from Untours over the last few years, you know, whether it's for my side of things, you know, having a supporter at a conference where I attend, or having a champion in the room, you know, which Chris, you also do quite well every time we're in the same room, you know, at an event, which is incredibly important when you run your own business, when you run your own organization, because it can be quite isolating and you need that other champion in the room. But to also having, you know, or to open the doors to loads of different contacts and maybe, you know, other clients, whatever that may be. So that has been happening in the background for a while. And I think with the opportunity of Aberdeen and the launch, and I'm so obviously working on that, I knew that for us, it feels a little bit like the rest of our life as an organization. I knew the potential for expansion and the potential for growth and media awareness. So I went back to Jonathan and said, look, we have this going on. It's obviously top secret. It was at the moment, at that time. What do you think we can do together? And that conversation led to today. So I think, yeah, it's an ongoing journey, which is very, very important to us, you know, working with people alongside us that we can travel with, as opposed to, you know, come in, the leave, and then, you know, not care anymore from either side.
Completely agree. It just makes it a lot easier when you're at an event, when you've got people there that you know, and you can just, it just relaxes you more, than you can go off and do more networking, etc. No, I completely agree. So in terms of Untours, how did they support you? Was that through funding, mentorship, visibility? You know, for those listeners who are maybe, and watchers maybe thinking, okay, Untours sounds amazing, we'd love to get in touch with them, but how do they actually help you? So how did they sort of help Invisible Cities?
In loads of different ways. So it started with this kind of being the champion in the room for us, and letting others, partners, supporters know about us in a practical way. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2023, wasn't it? Japan and the Adventure Travel
I believe so.
Summit. Am I saying that right? Where there was a pitching competition for social enterprises or businesses in travel who do good to pitch on stage and potentially win a cash prize, but also just raising the awareness to potential clients. So I applied to go to that and was selected. So traveled to Japan and finished second, which I think was out of 3, which I think was the best position, because nobody's mad at the second. I'm not the loser and I'm not the winner. So it was a really great experience to have. We had, as it turns out, existing clients in the room, but also made new ones and different things. So, and Japan from Scotland is so far away. Without that opportunity, I would have never been able to attend, just as part of the business and the growth and the development. So, but then, you know, introducing us to potential partners, you know, Jonathan was just in Valencia when I was in Valencia, so kindly put me in the room with potential stakeholders and partners, you know, and I wouldn't have access to that with my own network. And then finally the investment as well, which is come along at this time, because we are currently expanding to different locations. So one thing I would say is that, you know, from a travel business or a social enterprise, there is something around timing and doing things for the, you know, seeking investment or even seeking support for the right things. I do believe it hadn't come together before. That question of, it wasn't if we worked together, it was when and how. We hadn't found it before because it wasn't right. Whereas we came now because we are in this phase of expanding to 4 new cities by next year, being 10 in 10 years, and then even in more cities by 2027. And we're in that need of expanding and getting more money, but also more support and relationships, introducing us in the room to people like Skyscanner, which again, we didn't have that relationship before, has been incredible. So it's been, from all fronts is the answer to that question.
As you're saying, obviously the mentorship and the funding and things like that is a very important part of it, but the networking and the connections, to me, that sounds like that's where it's really at. It's incredible what you can do in terms of what Jonathan can put you in touch with, etc. So,
yeah.
And I'll just add it.
We know travel is go on. Travel is a small world as well. I always think it's amazing, but also, this can be a positive or a negative. I've definitely gone to events where I've ended up speaking to the same people that I absolutely love and really like talking to, but sometimes you need a little bit of help to expand your network and your connections, and so many people do amazing things in the space that also, when people say, I've never heard about Invisible Cities before, I totally understand why, because there are so many people doing great out there. So having that connection is very important.
For sure. But I was just going to add, maybe not to contrast a little bit this conversation. Of course, we fully believe in kind of holistically how we can support this movement of using tourism as a force for good in the world, and the role of small businesses within that, and the need that the world needs for them to be bigger and better. And that means a lot of different types of support and can mean. But I also think that there's like a tendency amongst the philanthropy, the NGOs, the like do-gooders in this space of like offering a lot of advice or a lot of education. And if we're talking about businesses, sometimes they just need the money. And like that, and the other stuff does matter. It does. But it's the money piece that's like doesn't exist anywhere else, that I think is a huge problem. And so we're doing our best to try to fill that gap, but we need others to jump in. That sometimes, an entrepreneur or a business, they have the things that they need. They just need the capital to make the right investments to grow. And so some of our relationships with our investees are not quite as in depth as they are with Invisible Cities. That made sense for us. And of course, because like the relationship was quite long before we got to the actual investment. But there's others where like we see the opportunity, the need is there, the impact potential is there. We provide the funding gets repaid over time, and we don't need to do much more than that. And that's totally fine with us as well. Because that is like, that's kind of where we lead, is like, and what's unique about what I think Untours Foundation can offer through the Reset Tourism Fund is like real money that needs to be paid back, but it's accessible, it's affordable. They're the kind of typical restrictions and securities and collateral that comes with debt, which is how we typically invest. We don't have those, so we make it just much easier and much more accessible. And there's just a huge need for that. Regardless of all the other stuff also there is a need, but sometimes it's just that we need to get money into the hands of amazing people so they can do more amazing stuff.
Yeah. And I will say, I think what's important, that's absolutely right. I've definitely felt a slow death by incubator at some point. If I was offered to go on again on another program or all of this, which takes time and capacity. So there is need for money. But also all of that comes down, I think, to the trust and the rapport that you build. And I've always felt like if I've said to Untours, what I need is this, then that's what the direction would have been, to kind of also trust the people who run those businesses to tell you, no, all I need is cash, or actually I don't want it at the moment, at some point then, or I said, I think it's maybe in a few months and not now, whatever it is, right? But yeah, that's those things are true. Comes a time when you just need the hard cash, but also you need to be trusted that you know best what that looks like for you, the support. And that comes with trust.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, so many people have some great ideas, etc. But unfortunately, in today's world, it does need the cash to push it forward. And we all know the issues that so many banks and other lenders just aren't giving out loans and all that sort of stuff anymore. It's just not as readily available as it was, 5-6 years ago. So having someone like yourself, Jonathan, is to help with that, if the business is right and what they're trying to do for that world changing aspect is right, then it's I commend you. It's a great cause, to be honest. Zakia, is it, I don't know if it's something you would be able to know or not off the top of your head, but is there a moment or a milestone that you feel would not have been achievable for Invisible Cities if it wasn't for the help from Untours?
Well, I mean, I think the launch in Aberdeen and the launch of our expansion wouldn't have been the same without you, without Untours in the room, and without that support. And but I think so it was a special moment for us because obviously Invisible Cities was born from a wish to use travel and the experience of travel to change the narrative around people who were having a hard time and break down the stigma. But sometimes day to day, when you work with really strong challenges that all the guides have, you get caught in that mindset of being a homelessness organization. And I did not want that. What I wanted was for us to strongly come out that we want to revolutionize travel and experience and showcase that we can do it differently. We live in a world as well where, and some of our existing cities like Edinburgh, we talk about over tourism and locals versus travelers and all of that. And we want to be the bridge between those different groups. So for me to be able to have strong partners and to have Untours in the room who kindly also invited one of your partners and Skyscanner to attend meant that it gave us that credibility and it gave us that sense that we were doing already, we had the industry behind us as well. And that was really important. And we have the industry behind us to expand to all the other cities. And that's what I wanted to showcase to the Royal Foundation and the Homeless Program and to everybody else in the room, right? And I think the day went as well, or that launch, that kind of first step into our expansion went as well as I could have hoped. There wasn't anything that I would do differently when it comes to that. So it was a great opportunity. And again, I have asked other potential funders, partners, stakeholders to come along and they didn't. Not everybody made the trip to Aberdeen especially when you come from as far as New York or New York State, to come alongside it. So I think it's also, we did speak about it at the Royal Foundation, to have people from different parts of the world in the sector together. So, but it is also the beginning of that journey, right? We are a new-ish investee for Untours. So maybe ask me the question in a year's time. We want to do we have an exciting project where we want to do a roadshow of all the different cities and the guide stories and how they've evolved and what kind of change this has created over the last 10 years for them everywhere in our 10 cities, culminating in a big event in Edinburgh to celebrate 10 years of Invisible Cities. So maybe after that, I come back on the podcast and we can have a chat about all of this. But yeah, so it feels it's the beginning of that journey.
Is that
really.
nearly 10 years? Well, that's incredible. Well done, Zakia.
Oh, I know. Yes. Well, thank you. And, Chris, you have also been following in part of that journey for a while now. Of course, we had COVID in the middle. And then, the first 2 years was the startup phase where, like anybody building a startup, is just yourself and many sleepless nights and everything. So is it really 10 years? I don't know. but that's what the calendar says. So we will celebrate it in style. We will do.
Don't sell yourself. Don't sell yourself
a big
short.
campaign.
Even though with COVID, the fact that many of us are still in business after that whole 2 and a bit years of madness, it's commendable, to be honest, and to be able to survive it. Not many businesses survive, so to be able to get through all that period, it just shows you how good a business Invisible Cities was, and how together everyone was, and all the other guys and everything else, just to try and push through and get through the other side. So yeah,
That's true.
So Jonathan, obviously you spoke about Skyscanner or TUI, etc. How did they come on board? Now, how did you manage to get companies like Skyscanner, etc.? There's everyone knows who Skyscanner is. Everyone knows who TUI is. What inspired them to join the foundation?
I think it's there's within the kind of larger corporations within the space, most of them have some kind of philanthropic efforts, and
Are not all evil corporations that you're saying that they've actually got a nice side?
I didn't say I didn't use those exact words, so I'll let you say that. But yeah,
to be honest, I quite like Skyscanner. And just to be fair, I was like,
they're good. Totally. I would, yeah, but they all have this kind of philanthropic component. Some through a foundation, some through kind of corporate philanthropy. They're trying to do certain levels of good coming out of the company, but most of them have the infrastructure set up to support NGOs and nonprofits doing work. And so what they don't have is the capacity or know-how or networks to support small businesses. So I think that that's what we offer that's different. That we can be kind of a direct conduit to like on the ground in host destination businesses that are both potential suppliers for a lot of these companies, but are also just again kind of the best examples of how tourism can transform a local community for the better. So that's been the interest, I think, of from the Expedias and the Skyscanners and the TUIs and the Godas and the others, is that we're able to be that conduit. And then they're money recycles. So from a funding perspective, when you make a grant, you get one level of impact and then you're done, and that money is gone. When they donate into our fund, it's a donation into us. We turn it into a revolving loan. And so they're getting multiple times of impact off of the same donated dollar or pound or euro. And from like, all of corporate philanthropy has a marketing component to it, right? And so from a marketing ROI perspective, that's that many more stories, that's that many more kind of metrics that they can then tell to their audience with the same donated dollar. So and now you're just hearing my like funding pitch when I'm out fundraising, but yeah, I think that's where the interest is. But it's mostly around like seeing the opportunity to support small businesses, but like the infrastructure and the know-how to actually do that and to manage like a loan fund. Like most people don't want to do that. It's not the most simple process in the world, but we have this unique knowledge to know how to do it. So yeah, I think that's where the interest has mostly lied.
Mm-hmm. So, well, we're coming towards near the end of the podcast already. I can't believe it feels as if it's just flown in. So I'm going to ask you sort of both a question. I'll start with you, Zakia. So you've sort of alluded to it already, but what's next for the Visible Cities? What do you see on the horizon? Obviously, you've mentioned new destinations, etc. Is that the main focus of your other things you're looking to try and achieve?
Yeah, it's the main focus is to so the last 10 years we have kind of refined how we work with people. And if you were to look at even our training a few years back to what it's like now and how we recruit people, a lot of that has changed to really adapt to how we can work best with people. So we want to use our know-how and what we've learned to really ramp up and reach out to more people. So rather than the 170 people in 9 years, to have over that number and more in a year, each year. So that's the plan. Not everybody becomes a guide, and that's fine, but everybody gets something out of it because you build up confidence, skills, knowledge that you can do and be anything you want in the world. So by being able to launch in our other cities will also kind of increase our impact, but also reach out different groups in our existing cities. There are still some, for example, working with women is slightly more complicated for us than women specifically. then mixed groups. So being able to create some capacity to do that a little bit more, and then still, launch internationally. I know it's something that I have been speaking about for a long time. And what I love so much about the fact that we are a business and a social enterprise is that we can do things and sometimes really say this totally doesn't work. Or, are we going to launch into the US or Italy or those destinations I mentioned before, and not feel bad about that, because we can trial them out and then see. So after our 10 cities in 10 years, we're looking at being able to launch at least part of our activities in other parts of the world, and keep on growing and offering more tours that hopefully bring meaningful experiences. I think it's really exciting to be able to talk about things that no other tours talk about, and whether it's addiction, an experience of violence, or we just launched a tour in Edinburgh around adoption, which is a strange theme, but obviously relates a lot to women in the previous centuries who were not able to keep children, linking it to the past, the present, and the future. So anyway, loads of exciting plans, but the focus for the next few years is that expansion in the UK, and then identify where we will launch fast internationally.
And for anyone listening, I've been on a couple of Invisible City tours, and you need to take them out. The stories from some of the guides are incredible, to be honest, and they were fun, they were sad, they were every emotion you can imagine all came through the whole process. It was a great experience. Jonathan, yourself, what's sort of next for you guys?
We'll continue to build up the Reset Tourism Fund to help more businesses, to support the growth of more businesses. So again, there's a massive capital gap for impact-focused small businesses. And so we're trying to fill it. So the goal is to get the fund to $10 million. Not 15 to 20% of the way there now, so somewhere in that range. So we have some ways to go to build up the capital that we're managing and revolving into all of these small businesses around the world. So that's really the focus of this side of our foundation work is bringing more partners on board, and then therefore more funding partners, which allows us to be to invest in many more businesses.
And what advice would you give to any tourism businesses, operators, social enterprise businesses who are maybe listening, who are now listening to this thinking, I would love to partner with you, with Untours? Now, how do they get in touch with you guys? Now, what's the process? Now, what's the sort of best ways?
Yeah. There's the easiest ways. We have an application on our website. You can find it, click around to the Reset Tourism Fund, and then there's a relatively simple application that we then take and review, and then if it looks like it's a good fit, we proceed. A few pieces of advice would be, as Zakia has done as well, it's about kind of patience. Sometimes, because we're working with multiple funding partners that have their money has specific impact or geographic focuses, it often happens that we see an opportunity that we think is really great, but there's just not the right earmarked capital to apply to it just yet. But we're always adding new money to the mix with different focus areas. And so, sometimes we just can't help today, but we would really like to help in 6 months or 1 year or what have you. So that's one piece of advice. And the other, I often say when talking with social entrepreneurs, Zakia mentioned she could be like death by incubator, and I think that can be a culture of within the social enterprise space of being really good at selling the impact and selling the idea of impact, and winning grants, in business competitions and incubators and this kind of stuff. And we're starting to, more and more be able to sniff these out. We call them grantpreneurs, like entrepreneurs who have a business, but really the entire business model at this point is built on getting that next grant or winning that next competition because they're really dynamic speakers, or they have they're able to appeal to the funding base, but they don't actually have a solid business model. And so we as investors, we have to be able to sort through that and find those entrepreneurs and the businesses they lead that have an actual business underneath it is financially sound or can be, should be, like with the right kind of support as it grows. So I highly, highly recommend for all social entrepreneurs out there to not lean so much into the social that you don't have a real business model. Because if you don't, then you just become an NGO or nonprofit, and that's fine, but that's a totally different path. And if you want to be a business, you need a business. And of course, the passion and the impact like must remain. But it has to be done with like a solid business space. So that's we look directly and quickly for that and try to like identify those businesses that have that solid financial footing and model that makes sense. But the entrepreneurs need to keep zeroed in on that, or they'll struggle to grow in the way that they want.
No, great advice. And Zakia, I'll give you the last word. Anyone who wants to get in touch with yourself or wants to know more about what you guys do, or maybe even help out, what's the best ways?
Yeah, I mean, get us on any social media platform, Invisible Cities Tours or LinkedIn, or to come on a tour. The best way, I think it relates to whenever people say, how can I help? And I said, you can book our tours as part of your company or your team away day or your program or your event in any of our locations. And we also have virtual tours, that we developed during COVID. So they are, even if you're not in the UK, you can still do that. And just get in touch and see how these things work. But I love that advice. I think, from what it means from my side of things as an entrepreneur to sometimes, focus on the grants or so focus on the injections of money, when actually I need to focus on selling the tours. I need to focus on finding new customers, new clients, repeat ones, working with our OTAs or working on our reviews and all the thing, or an ISE or whatever the aspect of the business means, so that working inside the business so that, it grows and sells more, and not just go for the potential big cash prizes and things like that, which is a hard balance to find as well. But yeah, so we're always happy to partner with operators, different groups, and if we can't work together, then we will say, this is not what we do, but let's keep chatting. So no one, please do get in touch, even if you think, oh, I don't know how that could work out. We could probably find a way to make it work, or not, and stay in touch. So
fantastic. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough. This has been fascinating to know more about what Untours do. Obviously, Invisible Cities is going strength by strength. And I think anyone listening to this must be inspired by what they're hearing. The fact that there are businesses out there who are willing to help and fund and help the right business if they have the right goals and the right sort of mindset, and they're trying to change the world, as you say, Jonathan. It's I commend you all. And I've always loved Invisible Cities and what you guys do, and I think I've got another company to admire as well now in Untours. So thanks again for joining the podcast, and I'm sure we'll have you on again.